August 17, 1985. Studio B at Sunset Sound Recorders in Hollywood was locked down tighter than a federal building, with security guards posted at every entrance and signed NDAs from every person within a 5-block radius. Inside the legendary recording space where the Beach Boys had crafted Pet Sounds and Led Zeppelin had recorded Led Zeppelin 4, 44-year-old Bob Dylan sat hunched over his acoustic guitar, struggling through his 47th take of a song that would eventually become Brownsville Girl. The Nobel Prize winner was in the middle of what many considered his most creative drought, desperately trying to recapture the magic that had made him the voice of a generation. When the studio's heavy security door suddenly burst open and a slight figure in a purple leather jacket strode in uninvited, Dylan's first reaction was fury, until the intruder sat down at the unused piano in the corner and began playing a haunting melody that made Dylan's blood run cold. What happened in the next 22 minutes would not only completely transform Dylan's approach to the song he'd been wrestling with for months, but force the folk legend to scrap everything he thought he knew about musical storytelling and start over from scratch with an entirely new perspective. If you want to discover the secret encounters that shaped music history's greatest collaborations, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. What you're about to witness proves that sometimes the most powerful artistic breakthroughs happen when legends collide unexpectedly. The collision between Bob Dylan and Prince in 1985 was inevitable yet impossible to predict. Both artists were at critical junctures, Dylan struggling to prove his continued relevance in an MTV-dominated landscape, while Prince was riding Purple Rain's success, but feeling creatively restless, eager to push beyond commercial expectations threatening to box him in. Dylan had been working on his Knocked Out Loaded album for 8 months, battling writer's block unlike anything since his 1966 motorcycle accident. The Sunset Sound sessions had become increasingly tense and unproductive, with Dylan cycling through musicians and arrangements without finding the spark to bring his songs to life. Brownsville Girl, in particular, had become an obsession, an 11-minute narrative epic containing some of his most important storytelling, but which stubbornly refused to come together musically. That week, Prince had been in Los Angeles working on material for Parade, but Prince was growing frustrated with Hollywood's attempts to commercialize his artistic vision. He had taken to driving around the city at night in his purple BMW, seeking inspiration and authentic musical experiences away from manufactured major-label studios. 27-year-old sound engineer Lisa Thompson had been working with Dylan at Sunset Sound for 6 weeks, watching the legendary songwriter struggle with creative demons that seemed to be eating him alive. Lisa had grown up in Minnesota, not far from Prince's Minneapolis, and had always been fascinated by the parallel evolution of two artists from the same Midwestern landscape who had taken completely different paths to fame. Sunset Sound Recorders was one of Hollywood's most secretive recording facilities, where artists could work without media scrutiny. Dylan had chosen Studio B for its isolation and vintage equipment, hoping the legendary acoustics might help him reconnect with his musical roots. On August 17th evening, Dylan had been working alone since 2 p.m., cycling through different approaches to Brownsville Girl with increasing desperation. The song's complex narrative, telling the story of a man obsessed with a B-movie actress and his journey through the American Southwest, required a musical framework that could support its literary ambitions without overwhelming its emotional core. By 9 p.m., Dylan was on take 47, his voice hoarse, his fingers cramping. Lisa Thompson watched from the control room as the folk legend's frustration reached a boiling point. "This isn't working," Dylan muttered into his microphone. "The song's got everything it needs lyrically, but the music's fighting against the words instead of supporting them." Lisa nodded sympathetically. "Maybe you need a different musical approach entirely, something that complements the cinematic quality of the story." Dylan was about to respond when they heard the studio's main door slam open with enough force to rattle the walls. They saw a slight figure in a purple leather jacket walking toward the unused piano. In the studio's warm lighting, Dylan could make out the intruder's face, unmistakably Prince. "Excuse me," Dylan called out sharply. "This is a private session. You can't just walk in here. Prince ignored him, sitting at the piano and adjusting its positioning. How the hell did you get past security? Dylan demanded. Prince looked up calmly. I heard you were having trouble with a song. I thought I might be able to help. Dylan stared for several seconds, mind racing through responses. His first instinct was to call security, but something in Prince's manner, not arrogant but quietly confident and genuinely helpful, made him pause. You heard I was having trouble? Dylan asked slowly, walking down from the control room. How could you possibly know that? Prince smiled slightly, fingers finding chord progressions on the piano. Musicians talk, especially in a town like this. Plus, I can hear the frustration in your voice coming through the walls. This building isn't as soundproof as they claim. Lisa Thompson watched with fascination, realizing she was witnessing something potentially historic. So what exactly do you think you can do to help? Dylan asked, skeptical but no longer hostile. Play me what you've got so far, Prince said, settling into the bench. Let me hear what you're trying to accomplish. Dylan hesitated for a moment, then picked up his acoustic guitar and launched into the most recent version of Brownsville Girl. His performance was technically proficient, but emotionally flat, the result of dozens of repetitions that had drained the song of its original spontaneity and power. The narrative structure was intact, the story of Gregory Peck, the B-movie actress, the journey through Texas and New Mexico, but the musical accompaniment felt rote and uninspired. As Dylan sang, Prince listened intently, his hands moving silently over the piano keys, as if he were mapping out harmonic possibilities. When Dylan reached the song's climactic sections, Prince began adding subtle piano accompaniment, not intrusive or attention-grabbing, but supportive and atmospheric, creating musical landscapes that enhanced the story's visual and emotional elements. The transformation was immediate and startling. Prince's piano work didn't compete with Dylan's vocals or guitar. Instead, it created cinematic soundscapes that made the song's narrative come alive in ways that Dylan's solo performance never could. The sections about driving through desert landscapes suddenly had the spaciousness and loneliness of the American Southwest. The parts about the movie theater and the B-movie actress gained a dreamy, nostalgic quality that perfectly captured the protagonist's obsession and romantic delusion. Dylan found himself singing with renewed energy and conviction, responding to Prince's musical cues and discovering new emotional depths in lyrics he had written months earlier. The collaboration was entirely spontaneous and unplanned, but it felt natural and inevitable, as if the two artists had been working together for years. When the song ended, the studio was completely silent, except for the fading resonance of the piano strings. Dylan set down his guitar and looked at Prince with a mixture of amazement and something approaching gratitude. Dylan struggled for words, which was unusual for someone who had built his career on verbal precision. That was exactly what the song needed. How did you know? Prince stood up from the piano bench, his expression modest but satisfied. Your lyrics paint pictures, but they needed musical colors to make those pictures come alive. I was just providing the palette. Now I want to ask you something that might change how you think about artistic collaboration. When have you discovered that someone with a completely different background could see solutions to your problems that you never would have found alone? The most surprising part of this story is still coming. Lisa Thompson, still recording everything from the control room, watched as Dylan and Prince began an intense discussion about the song's structure and meaning. Dylan explained his vision for Brownsville Girl as a meditation on American mythology, the power of cinema to shape our understanding of reality, and the way popular culture creates romantic fantasies that can either inspire or destroy the people who believe in them too deeply. Prince listened carefully, then shared his own perspective on storytelling through music. He talked about his approach to creating sonic landscapes that could transport listeners into different emotional and psychological spaces, his belief that music should function like cinema for the ears, and his techniques for using harmony and rhythm to enhance narrative rather than simply providing accompaniment. The problem with your original arrangement, Prince said gently, is that it's treating the song like folk music when it's really a movie. The story is too big and too visual for simple acoustic accompaniment. It needs orchestration, but orchestration that serves the narrative instead of overwhelming it. Dylan nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in Prince's analysis. I've been so focused on maintaining my folk roots that I've been afraid to let the song become what it wants to be. Authenticity isn't about limiting yourself to one style, Prince replied. It's about finding the right musical language for whatever truth you're trying to express. Over the next 2 hours, Dylan and Prince worked together to completely reconstruct Brownsville Girl. Prince added layers of piano, synthesizer, and even some subtle drum programming, creating a rich sonic foundation that supported Dylan's narrative without competing with it. Dylan, meanwhile, revised some of his vocal phrasing and guitar work, allowing his performance to become more conversational and less formal, as if he were telling the story to a close friend rather than performing it for an audience. The collaboration was unlike anything either artist had experienced before. Dylan had always been fiercely protective of his creative process, rarely allowing other musicians significant input into his songwriting or arrangements. Prince, meanwhile, was known for his absolute control over every aspect of his music, from composition to final mix. But in Studio B that night, both artists found themselves genuinely excited to surrender some control in service of creating something neither could have achieved alone. Lisa Thompson later described watching Dylan and Prince work together as, quote, seeing two master craftsmen from different traditions discover they spoke the same fundamental language. Despite their vastly different musical backgrounds and public personas, both artists shared a commitment to using music as a vehicle for deeper truths about American life and human experience. When they finally finished their collaboration around midnight, Dylan and Prince listened to the playback in amazement. Brownsville Girl had been transformed from a struggling folk song into a cinematic epic that perfectly balanced literary sophistication with emotional accessibility. The new arrangement honored both Dylan's storytelling tradition and Prince's innovative production techniques, creating something that was authentically both artists while being entirely new. "This is what the song was always supposed to be," Dylan said quietly, shaking his head in wonder. "I just couldn't hear it until now," Prince smiled. "Sometimes we're too close to our own work to see its full potential. Fresh ears can reveal possibilities we never imagined." The immediate impact extended far beyond that single song. Dylan scrapped most of his other knocked-out loaded material and began approaching his entire album with the cinematic sensibility Prince had helped him discover. Prince, meanwhile, took inspiration from Dylan's literary approach and began incorporating more narrative complexity into his compositions. Lisa Thompson's recording of their session became one of the most bootlegged and studied recordings in rock history, though never officially released. Musicians analyzed how two different artistic approaches had merged to create something greater than either could achieve independently. The collaboration marked a turning point in both artists' willingness to work with others. Dylan became more open to outside musical input, leading to successful later albums including Time Out of Mind. Prince began seeking opportunities to work with artists from different musical backgrounds. 6 months later, Dylan sent Prince a handwritten note, thanking him for, quote, showing me how to hear my own songs with new ears. Prince responded with a cassette of unreleased material, incorporating storytelling techniques he'd learned from Dylan. The story became legendary in music circles, though both artists remained characteristically reserved about discussing it publicly. Dylan would only say that Prince had, quote, helped me remember that music is supposed to serve the story, not the other way around. Today, music historians consider the Dylan-Prince collaboration one of the most significant unplanned musical encounters of the 1980s. It demonstrated that artistic greatness often emerges from collision of different perspectives, and that powerful creative breakthroughs happen when artists are humble enough to learn from traditions outside their experience. The lesson from that summer night remains relevant for any artist struggling with creative limitations. Sometimes the solution to our problems comes from the most unexpected sources, and the key to breakthrough is remaining open to perspectives that challenge our assumptions about what's possible. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of music's most serendipitous collaborations. If this story inspired you to seek out unexpected creative partnerships or to approach your own artistic challenges with greater openness, Please subscribe and share your own experiences of breakthrough moments in the comments below.